Hi, this is Bobby Cobb. Welcome to another edition of the Presence Posse Presents. And joining me today, I have Danielle McMahon and Jan Hart. And I'm just going to open things up a little bit and let them introduce themselves, and then I'll follow up after they have completed. So, Danielle, tell us a little bit about the horse whisperer,
The
people whisperer.
People Whisperer. That's a title that I'm growing into, being
Oh,
a
good.
people whisperer. I am actually a certified horse whisperer. Um, but my title that I go by mostly is I'm a personal peace coach.
Hmm.
And I'm a speaker, and I enjoy the Presence Posse, gathering with other presence practitioners, whatever we call ourselves. That's how we join together here as presence practitioners. And the most recent work I've done has been experiencing personal peace with ponies. So I had a couple retreats last year. I don't have any planned yet for this year, but we'll see. Hopefully, one will come about. I have a friend in um, Arizona. I think it's, well, I'm not going to say it, somewhere in Arizona, who is talking about having a retreat maybe at her place. So
Oh, nice.
excited for that possibility.
And how are you doing with snow? Are you still in the grips of winter, or is it mostly melted for you now?
2 days ago it was 80 degrees, and today it's snowing. It's spring in Michigan.
Wow.
That's kind of like spring in Anchorage, sort of. Also joining us today is Jan Hart from Ireland, who is also a peace of mind practitioner. Jan, tell us a little bit about
I
yourself
will.
and the work
Yeah,
that you're
thanks,
doing these
Bobby.
days.
We don't have any snow here at this time of year, thankfully.
And we're ready to
um,
get rid of ours, that's for sure.
yeah, I bet you are. Yeah. So yeah, I'm a peace of mind practitioner and a clarity coach, and I seem to attract a lot of work in the space of navigating conflict, um, interpersonal communication, and coming to reconciliation and all that kind of stuff. And um, it's wonderful work. And most of the time, I work with people in workplaces, but I do also work with people one to one, similar to Danielle, for personal peace. Um, and more, I find people are interested in this whole concept of presence and coming into presence
Yeah.
and feeling their own presence, I think, and reconnecting with the essence of who they are and the energy of who they are and coming alive again seems
Yeah, I
to
don't
be
know if
a
you guys have,
mm,
I don't know if you've noticed that it seems to me the interest in personal peace is rising simultaneously while the exterior world, especially as
gets
it's
more and more manic.
broadcast on the news, yeah, as that gets more and more messy, it's like people are opening up to coming within and wondering, is it possible to experience a very deep level of peace in the midst of all of this turmoil, which I
And quiet.
think that all of the partners here at the Presence Posse are proponents of that concept that personal peace
Yeah.
can override the external chaos. And when we're grounded and in line and in harmony, it just naturally does that a little bit more. So, my name is
Yeah.
Bobby Cobb. I'm a liberation hypnotist, and I work with organizations and individuals. And I tend to work with them in two areas where people tend to invite me into their life just to see if things could show up a little bit different. One is when people are in transition, if you're changing jobs or retiring, or your relationship status is taking a dramatic change from what has been the norm for you recently, then very often those moments of transition can also be moments of transformation. And we're already in the mood of resetting and reconsidering and revamping. And, I think there is an opportunity in those moments to deconstruct what it is that we're doing and see if we can add a little effectiveness layer, one being more grounded and aligned, and then reconstruct things back and build a little bit more of a effective relationship with the way the world is unfolding. And today we're talking about presence and cycles. And just beforehand, we were kind of discussing initially that topic did not have a lot of easy things for us to grab to be grist for the conversational mill. But I think it's going to be really fun exploring that. So just kind of interested in your guys' initial thoughts. And Danielle, it was your topic. So if you don't mind, I'll start with you. You were the one that suggested this.
Yeah, and it came up because I was listening to a podcast, and the person being interviewed was Alex Utterman, who I'd not heard of before. But at the end of his podcast, the podcast is by also an Alex Ferrari, I think. And he asked the same several questions. And one is, what's your definition of God? And so this woman said, God, generating, operating, and destroying, all backed by pure love, but that it's a constant motion. It's not a static being. It's the cycle of life. It's the circle of life. And I've never heard anything close to that as a
I
definition
have not
of
either.
God, right?
Me
So
neither.
found it very insightful, very yeah, there's the circle of life. Everything is in cycles. You mentioned the circadian rhythms of our individual day and our biorhythms, or whatever you want to call those. And then, there's hormonal cycles, and there are season cycles, and there's a water cycle on the earth. I mean, I just could think of cycle after cycle right in the circle of life. And the profile picture that I have is from a training I did with a woman that certified me in equine assisted life coaching. And so she was coaching us through something, right? So I brought up my sister's death. And this horse, as we were talking about it, just circled me and just kept circling me as we were interacting. And that was the consensus, right? He's showing me the circle of life. And she's still there in some form, and she'll be back, and she's always available to you, and all of those things that I feel. But it was interesting to have it mirrored that way with the horse. And I don't know, circles and cycles and all of that seemed like a really took it to a new level to hear that definition, right? Like as a more, and I guess I hear of spiritual growth as being it's not a cycle. What is it? Spiral.
Spiral.
Spiral. Yeah, I had to make to remember.
It's okay.
Yeah, so that was what inspired the topic for me, was that
I like that.
different.
Well,
Interesting.
as I started thinking about it, one of the things that occurred to me is, well, two things that occurred to me. One is we do a new moon ceremony. We've just started doing that this year. And we started thinking about it last year. And I'm kind of the one who's spearheading the production of that. And in getting ready for that last year, I started to do my beginning of the month planning. I do, kind of review my last month. I think about my next month. I think about what's really important. I review things that are on my to-do list that have been sitting there thinking, all right, 5 months I haven't done squat with it. Do I really want to hang out and keep doing that? And I've always done that the first of the month. It just seemed like a good natural time to kind of, clear out your old bills and set your new intentions and all of that. And I shifted it to doing it with the new moon, and the next new moon is coming up on Wednesday. And man, I just noticed an interesting little energetic shift in me. It was kind of like and I didn't realize I was doing this, but it was though I had been dancing to some music and I had not yet found the beat. And I wasn't aware that I was dancing to my own rhythm. But the moment that I made that shift, and I made it in October of last year, just harmonizing my beginning of the calendar month activities with the cycle of the new moon and coming into harmony with that. And it felt to me like all of a sudden, wow, I finally have found the rhythm. And this is so much easier. And the second thing that popped up to me is I am a teacher of presence as well. All of the posse members are. And one of the tools that I use to help people get present is their breath. That's the one thing that it's very easy for us to return to. It's very easy to harmonize. It's very easy to take conscious control of our breathing. And that cycle is a powerful cycle to bring us present. And if you think about it, that's one of our shorter cycles, because average person breathes in 15 to 17 breaths in a typical minute. So, roughly each one of those complete cycles is about 3 seconds or 4 seconds. That every 4 seconds we have a new breath coming in, and harmonizing with that, I found is a pretty good way to bring us present in the moment. So I look forward to exploring this with you guys. What are your thoughts, Jan? Or what's showing up for you? What's occurring now?
Yeah, I'm warming up here. I love the definition of God. I've never heard anything like that, and it makes total sense. The other thing that comes to mind is this whole thing with circles. They're very big in magic as well, circles and cycles. And circles define a space almost within space. But that's a bit off topic. I suppose what I'm noticing more at the moment is I started a little practice earlier in the spring, and I call it my daily miracle walk. And I go out every day and walk for an hour, and very slowly, just with my senses open, and just to hear and see. And the changes are palpable, if not on a daily basis, then definitely on a weekly basis. We have color now that wasn't there in winter. The smell of wild garlic is rampant. The birds are all starting to migrate back, and it's much noisier in the forest. The rabbits and the squirrels and the little bambies are starting to appear. And, that's the cycle of life too. And the cycle of nature and the seasons. And, as you were speaking, Bobby, you're talking about the breath, and I love the breath. Not just for bringing us into presence, but I think it's the simplest way for us to connect back to oneness as well. We're all breathing in and out the same air, and that's what connects us all and brings us home to each other. Those little cycles, but our heart is beating to a cycle as well, and our blood is flowing to cycles. So everything in nature is cyclical, and we're part of nature. So I guess everything is cyclical. And, even we're all of a similar vintage. We've gone through the cycle of being born and being infants and being toddlers and being children and teenagers and young people and students and parents. And, they're all cycles that we go through as we cycle through life as well. So, I didn't think I had anything to say about cycles, or I couldn't really see much about cycles before I came on. But as I listened to you guys, it's hard not to see them.
Yeah. Well, they're definitely a recurring pattern. That was something that was a big change for me moving up here. I moved from Florida, where Florida sort of has two seasons. It's either hot as Hades or it's not. and that's like the seasonal cycle. The weather is very consistent all of the time, and days get shorter and longer, but because it's closer to the equator, not nearly as much. And then moving up here to Alaska, I used to describe it, I haven't thought of this in a while, but when I described it, I moved up here right as we were transitioning out of summer into fall, and the leaves immediately started to change, and the days were getting shorter by 6 minutes a day at like this time of year. And in the fall, our days are either shortening or lengthening. And it was as if I felt like when I first moved here that I was feeling the earth breathe. And that was like just a totally new sensation and a new imagination for me that I hadn't previously experienced it. But it seems like harmonizing with the cycles that are occurring. It's like if you have the wisdom to just get up from your desk when you're frustrated and go do something else. I think one of the things that does for us is give us the opportunity to do like a little physiological reset and open ourselves up, and then just capture that rhythm again. And one of the things that many people have noticed is those are the times that the aha moments and the fresh insight and the new thinking, suddenly they have room to emerge. So how much of that does that occur to you guys, that may be one of the phenomenons that's happening there? We're reaching the end of a productive cycle where we've been in like full-blown work mode, and now we're moving into a more creative cycle, and then here comes an insight, or vice versa, back and forth between those.
I notice those cycles in myself a lot. I have certain working and resting cycles, and while I'm tuned in to my circadian rhythms on a daily basis, and I know when I'm most energetic and most focused, and when the best time of day is to engage in various things. I also notice that one of my cycles is to work. When I say work, I mean engage in activity. It doesn't have to be heavy or hard. But I do that for a long period of time, like a couple of months. And then I need to stop for maybe a week or 10 days. And then I go again for another couple of months. And then I stop. And other people, in my home here operate differently. They work 5 days and need 2 off, and I'm quite happy to keep going on the 2 days because that's not my pattern. I do stop, of course, and engage with my family and friends, but some people, we all have different patterns, and it's really just aligning and coming into harmony with what's going on for you, to make your life as easy and as graceful as possible, with the least amount of static going on.
And as you said, we're all of a certain age. So we may have come to this later in our lives, but I think most of us would like to help people realize that earlier in their lives, right? That you have the ability to sense those cycles, those productive cycles, those downtime cycles. So in the generating, operating cycles, and then there is the destroying cycle. So you could think, and certainly when I was younger, when those cycles, that part of the cycle would hit, like, what's happened? What's going on? What did I do to cause this? What do I have to do differently? Rather than just allow it to fall away and find out what it's making room for, right? Like
Yeah.
that's something that I feel like there's some wisdom in, that it has to be gained to a certain extent by experiencing it, by walking through those cycles a few times and believing that you're going to hit a new phase of that cycle again. It's
Yeah.
going to come back around. There is going to be more generating when that space is opened up from whatever has been destroyed or gone into entropy or whatever the case may be. There's that tendency to get afraid within that. And I feel like hope is generated by knowing that it's actually a very normal, natural cycle,
Yeah.
and they are everywhere.
They are
They're
everywhere.
present,
And
right?
you have to empty out the old wine before you can fill up your glass with something new and create something fresh. And we're slow to let go.
Right.
We don't
We
like that
become
part.
creatures of habit and we don't want to let our
Yeah.
habits go.
Yeah.
So if we're
Even with
present, we're
people.
not as habitually
Yeah.
driven. I feel like that's been a long sort of process for me. I am sort of habitually driven, and horses are creatures of habit, and so I have my habits that are coordinated with them, right? Like those are the bookends of my day, is putting the horses out in the morning and putting the horses back in the barn in the evening. And so um to have made that a little more flexible, probably, I know it helps me. I don't know if it helps them adapt to their
Yeah.
environment, but maybe, because if it's very predictable and habitual like that, if you change it, that can be very hard on them. So if you change it a little more frequently, then it's not as hard on
Yeah.
them if you don't change it by as much. Like when the time artificially changes, the animals don't know that. They don't
Yeah.
touch their clocks. They don't know. They don't change their clocks. So we try to do
Yeah.
it a little bit gradually, but
Yeah.
it's changed for them. That's very artificial. So they need to have a little bit of flexibility within their biological system so they can survive
Yeah.
some more changes. And I think that's a good mirror for me, right? Like
Really good.
I can be more willing to make small incremental changes so that when big changes show up, I'm not so shocked by them or discomforted by them.
Mhm. Yeah.
Well, and I would imagine too, Danielle, that living on a ranch, there's different things that you're doing different times of the year
Mhm.
all the time, right? I mean, so I would think compared to somebody who maybe works in an office, you're going to be a lot more in tune with when the moons are and when the seasons are, and if the winds of change happen to come a little bit earlier one year than they do
Right. And
typically.
not everybody sees that as a huge advantage, right? Like whether they're a horse person or they're looking at me as a horse person, that I'm out in the elements, we'll say, for at least 2 hours, morning hour, night,
Mhm.
every single day of the year. And to me, it is a great advantage. Most days. There are some days where I would like to send somebody else out there,
That
right?
there are.
But yeah, it does. It keeps me very connected to the cycles of nature and the sky and what's going on there. And but it's a wonderful experience for me most of the time. It's something that I'm really grateful to be that connected to nature. And I think from the time I was very young, I knew that was something I enjoyed.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. So part of, I mean, there are cycles that we create. I think of that, the cycle that I had with a beginning of the month, calendar month routine. That is an artificial construct that I've made versus now I'm more falling into kind of like what you're doing more naturally, Danielle, is, harmonizing with the actual rhythms that are out there. Do you guys see a difference in that? And is that something that's worth exploring? Is there as much potential in the cycles that we are creating versus the ones that we're recognizing and harmonizing into?
Well, you talked about the beginning of the month and the calendar. I mean, the calendar itself is a construct.
Mm.
We have monthly cycles and quarterly cycles and weekly cycles and daily cycles and time, and hours and minutes and seconds. And, they do serve a purpose on one level.
Yeah.
But we don't have to be married to them, as we can tend to be sometimes. I speak for myself. But it's very useful to have cycles of time and cycling through months, and when payroll is, and when you got to pay your bills, and when you can expect people to pay you, and
Yeah.
it kind of creates systems for us to operate in and navigate our way, I guess.
Yeah, and things very quickly just become a cycle. I mean, you think about going to the grocery store, people have a pretty cyclical routine in doing that. We're accumulating, then we're preparing, then we're replenishing, then we're removing out of our atmosphere when we get rid of the garbage and the leftover food and compost or do whatever it is that we do. Those, I mean, we are pattern recognition organisms.
Yeah,
We're very good at recognizing those
absolutely.
patterns.
I mean, that's the God cycle there you just described, Bobby. You generate your shopping list, you operate, you go off out and you do your shopping, you consume it, and then you destroy what's left over, or it gets destroyed.
Yeah.
Goes out in the garbage. Yeah,
and that too is an artificial way of obtaining nutrition, right? If we were living differently, we would do that more in tune with nature. Like we would have strawberries when strawberries get ripe, and we would have apples when apples get ripe, and not have them all year long available to us.
yeah. And we
So
wouldn't be eating food that grows on the other side of the world.
yeah. So some of that is a treat, right? To be able to have fruit in the middle of winter, and some of that is because of the demand causing genetic modification of the food that we're taking in as nutrition. Maybe it's not the same nutrition where it is same taste as it was. Like my college degree is in agronomy, and I did a paper on that sort of. It was for women's studies because I have a minor in women's studies and my major is agronomy. So, I opened it with the tomatoes from the grocery store don't taste like tomatoes, right? They taste like styrofoam. That's because they've been genetically modified to be shipped. So they have to have more cellulose so that they don't smoosh when they get shipped. And that's the difference in, demanding that we have tomatoes year round and then just enjoying them in their season or in however we preserve them from their season then, and not we wouldn't have them fresh, but we would have them available. So I don't know. It is an interesting question that Bobby poses. Is this better? Is it not? Is it, like we just are present to where we are within that cycle now? Are we returning more towards we're going to be more self-sufficient, or are we going to continue to be globally interdependent? Yeah. It
A lot of people would say that, humans are in the destroying of life cycle.
Yeah, there certainly is that element to it, that if we
Yeah.
don't do something differently, we're not going to be here for more than another 100 years.
No, no. And then, you see all these green shoots about sustainability and climate and environmental, but will it be enough? We'll have to wait and see. So we'll be gone.
Yeah, going back to the tomatoes, one of the things that I've been doing, I've started gardening up here. I didn't garden much in Florida. It was just too hot for me, but it's an outdoor activity I really enjoy up here. And first it was just planting some stuff and letting it grow. Then I started composting, and I have a vertical warm composting system where all of my table scraps and like newsprint and egg cartons and all of that type of stuff all go into the compost, and the worms change it into this just this black gold. I mean, this soil just seems so rich. And I've started growing some vegetables in there. And I had some tomatoes about a week ago. They're inside right now, but they're growing in this really rich soil under artificial daylight. And I popped about 4 or 5 of them in, and it was like my taste buds were practically revolting. They're like, we need more saliva to handle all of this taste. And I'm just remembering it. I'm practically drooling. It is. So that might be an interesting little thread that we could pull on, probably on another podcast.
Yeah.
But to look at the cycles that we are creating for the purpose of having dominion over nature. So that would be, getting our Chilean grown tomatoes up to North America or the Northern Hemisphere, so we could enjoy that fruit out of season. That's to have dominion over, versus what Danielle was suggesting. You have apples when the apples are ripe in your local area, and then you move on to strawberries and celery and then everything after that. And it is interesting, isn't it, how when people are farming, those things are naturally occurring. Not everything is getting ripe all at once, and not all of the same fish are flowing upstream all at once. There is a cycle. So if we make the conscious decision to live more in harmony with nature, as opposed to the idea that we are to have dominion over nature and to control it and subdue it, how would that influence our life experience and our just relationship to what is unfolding? And I think that kind of strikes me almost as a key question and a good coaching question. Are you living in harmony with the way life is unfolding, or are you feeling the need to constantly assist or resist what's unfolding and trying to have control over? Does anything come up for you guys?
That's the key word in that sentence, is trying to have control.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because that's a resistance too. I think if you are going to live, what's the word I'm looking for? A peaceful, present life, that's something that you have to be willing to relinquish, is the idea that you can control things. Like, that's just really not a thing. We can try. to control things, and it can seem like perhaps it's working at times,
Yeah.
but for the most part, we have the option of being present to what's unfolding, as opposed to trying to manage, trying to control, trying to
Yeah.
affect it in a way that we think might be best, because we don't ultimately know.
No, we
And that's
don't.
something that comes with age as well. I think it's very hard when you're young to understand that concept, that your point of view is not the only one or the only correct one, or that there may be several correct ways to navigate a particular experience in life, and to become tolerant, I suppose, and less resistant to what shows up, because we've all found over time that outside of our comfort zone often is where our most joyful growth comes from.
Mhm.
I just saw an interesting sign that had that sentiment to it, that all of your best growth happens just on the other side of your comfort zone. So you got to go right out to the edge and just lean over just
Yeah.
a little bit. I have
Courage
a,
is a useful muscle.
say it again, Jen.
I said courage is a useful muscle.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And as we build our courage muscles, the next time that we go and do it, if it was successful, we can think, oh, that wasn't that bad. I'll give that a try again. That was kind of
And that's
fun.
another cycle, I think, is that, every time we go to do something for the first time, we go through a cycle of, feeling a certain way and, being uncomfortable, being in the unknown and not knowing how things are going to work out. And well, at least I do anyway. I go through that cycle. And then once I've done it once, I'm out of the cycle. But I'm always back in it every time I try to do something new for the first time. But, we are part of nature, and what makes us, it's arrogant, I think, to think we can control nature. I mean, I know there's lots of people try, but nature's a lot more powerful than us little individuals here on our own, I think. Um, but the thing about presence to me is that when we do slow down and become present, we almost expand into an alignment with nature. It's almost like when we're settled and peaceful and present and in our own energy, we
Yeah.
connect with that greater part of ourselves and we come into harmony.
It's
In
interesting
doing
that you
that,
use the word expand. I've had those same thoughts, but I always think of relaxing into it.
yeah,
It's just
yeah,
a word, and it's
relaxing,
just how it's occurring to us. But
yeah,
um,
yeah,
yeah,
mm,
that it's always there. I've mentioned a couple of times on this podcast an exercise that I do, which is a check-in, and I recommend to new clients that they get into the practice of just checking in more than an hour, more than once every hour, 2 or 3 times every hour. Just check in and see how you're doing. And the initial thing that I just want people to search for, we add to this as we go along. But initially, just on a self-assessment scale, checking in and seeing how are you doing. And
yeah,
the scale that I use is 1, you're kind of the Buddha, you're in a very Zen meditative state at peace and harmony with all that is. And at 99, you're ready to run from the room and meditate or medicate or exercise or do whatever it is that you do to gain control. For some people, it's getting into a fetal position and letting the storm blow over, whatever works for you. and just check and see where are you on that scale, and just get into the habit of checking in, because one of the very first things that people begin to notice is just how cyclical our experience of life tends to be. That we have moments where we're very much in harmony with the way that it's unfolding, and it appears initially, as we begin to explore that, that's because the world, we've got the wind at our sails, we're in the flow, we've just got a great momentum. And it seems like when we're wrestling with it, it's the exterior world's not unfolding the way that we want, and we are literally trying to manipulate it to bend to our desires. But it normally only takes about a day or two for people to begin to notice, God, I'm doing something that I hate doing right now. But when that alarm went off, I had to say that I was I was kind of in a Zen temple sort of place. I was struggling. Things were not unfolding for me effortlessly in the moment, but it was kind of like the pleasure of doing a really challenging puzzle that stretches you just a little bit can still be good. And so people begin to notice that we have this rhythm of flow that's happening to us all the time. And well, a couple of things. One is we can begin to harmonize it, and it tends to bring up the awareness. If we're stuck in one mode, just try doing something else and see what happens. And just notice if that doesn't work, try something else again. And pretty soon you're going to be back in the flow again. But another thing I feel like it's also showing us is that we can have control over that experience. And the way that we do that is by either harmonizing or relaxing into what's unfolding right now, and where are the gifts, and where's the juice, and where is that good feeling that we should be paying attention to. And sometimes I get off on these rants and I wonder, am I actually even making sense?
No, you are making
No, let
sense.
me just stop and ask, how does that hit you guys? Is that
Well, what it brings up for me, Bobby, is this whole the generative cycle, in the God thing that we got from Danielle earlier. Because when we're in that creation generative mode, there can be tension. There's that creative tension that comes. And if we resist it and fight it, it just slows the whole creation process down. Whereas when we can relax with it and allow it to be there and be with it and everything else, then we get something from it. We get a message or an insight or something, and we move on with our creation. But we're so quick to look for release the tension, at all costs. Get rid of the tension, now, I'm not saying stress is good, but in the sense of generating and creating, there is often, and I've noticed myself that I can get into cycles where I get really frustrated, when I'm trying to create something, and oftentimes it's when you're in a confused state, if you can hold it and be with it, that's when the breakthrough comes. It's like what you were saying earlier. You have to take yourself out to the edge of it. It's not comfortable. But if we allow it and let it unfold and just be present with it, then oftentimes it takes us to the other side, to where all the hidden gems are. But that's what came up for me when you were speaking.
I like that. Danielle, anything show up?
So as you learn to check in with yourself, you're sort of overriding your automatic pilot, right? Like, if you don't know how you're doing, you're on automatic pilot.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then you're learning, to me, um, to perhaps harmonize that um, part of you that functions automatically with that deeper part of you. Yes, is that sort of the
Yeah.
goal of the exercise? Is
Yeah,
so
and just to there's other goals to that exercise. The other thing that people tend to see is the fact that it looks like and it feels like we are that our feelings are telling us about our circumstances and and how the world is unfolding right now. It's like a meter that is measuring that. But within just 2 or 3 days of doing this, and by doing this, I mean you do have to, because of that automatic pilot, Danielle, that you're mentioning, that we all get into. And really, that's the purpose of practice and repetition when we're learning a new skill, is that so we can turn it over to our autonomic nervous system, and we just have the muscle memory to be able to, cut the right piece of fruit, or, cut the right backhand in tennis, or, swing in
drive
golf.
the car?
Yeah, yeah, we want to automate those and integrate those into part of who we are and turn them over to automatic. And that is a wonderful superpower. And it can be one of the biggest challenges that we face because we don't pay attention. And, we're sitting there making breakfast, but we're thinking about the podcast that we have coming up a little bit later today, or the appointment that we've got a little bit later in the week. And so we're doing all of this mental time traveling. And through doing that exercise, interrupting the pattern. So we do have to use like an old NLP pattern interrupt, which just can be a countdown timer on your phone. But when that goes off, just taking a heartbeat, one breath, and saying, how am I doing right now? Where am I? And now you'll begin to notice that when you're frustrated, when you're anxious, that's when you're wrestling with the way the world unfolds. And, Fred is always talking about points of inquiry, that we can go and explore to see what's really going on. And ultimately, that can become a trigger for that. So it's almost a way, it's not really a trick per se, because I'm totally transparent about what we're doing and what the purpose of it is. But it is a way to interrupt all of the effortless activity that we fill our day with, often, to say, okay, just stop and pay a little bit attention and notice what your relationship is to the unfolding of life. So yeah, it shows a couple of different things as you continue to do it. But the two things that people notice the quickest is, man, I'm all over the place. And I think I probably have shared here one client that said that he was on the verge of rage. He listed himself in the low 90s on that scale that I talked about earlier. And he just got so frustrated, and almost like a gift, one of his dogs had rolled in some poop and needed a bath. So he went out and was giving his dogs, he's got 4 little dogs, and he was giving one of them a bath, and his alarm went off, and he was tracking his stuff. And he said he was at about a 17. So he'd gone from like a 93 to a 17 in one check-in. And that was the big aha moment. That's like, man, I have felt like my life is a constant struggle, but it's actually oscillating all over the place. And then the second thing that it's demonstrating is that as we begin to get into harmony with the way that life's unfolding, the stress in life just, it doesn't evaporate totally, but a lot of it goes away. There's a lot less going on. And some of it, it's kind of like hearing that new definition of God, I think it, obviously it hit Danielle enough that it was memorable to bring it up. And, it's hit Jan and I in such a way that it's like, wow, how are we going to
It is
incorporate
wow, though.
it? And it's cool and it's different and it's unique and it grabs our attention and gets us, to where we have that, oh my God response.
Yeah. 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 You'll have to send us a link for the podcast so we can listen to it.
Yeah. I would definitely. There were some other very interesting things in that particular interview as well, but the whole podcast is very interesting. So I will definitely put that link in here. But I feel like
great to listen to.
This topic, has brought up 2 or 3 more topics that we could expand on easily enough because it is so prevalent. And there's a learning cycle. We just now brought that up, right? It didn't come up earlier in there. And there's all the different places that they show up in. And some cases bring us to presence.
Mm-hmm.
In other cases, we need to bring presence to that cycle.
That's so true. That's so true.
Yeah. But thanks for entertaining my topic. It was really enjoyable.
Yeah, it was great. There's always plenty to explore in these.
And we are coming up kind of at the end of the hour. So just in terms of like signing off and final thoughts, if I could just get you guys to both share your final thoughts and then share as well how people can get in contact with you. And I'll put our little banner up there as well. Jan, you want to start us off?
Yeah, well, I guess on a very personal level, there's always an invitation to people to notice their own cycles. I mean, at a very basic level, we all know whether we're a morning person or a night owl, for instance. And if we can just start paying attention to our own patterns, as Danielle said, that in itself can sometimes bring us into presence. And it's worth the exploration.
Beautiful. And how can people get a hold of you if they want to continue?
The easiest place to find me is on Facebook, and anybody can message me. And I'm also on email, but Facebook is probably the easiest. Yeah, thanks, Mother.
Yeah, janetjanhart.ie for those of you who are listening, Ireland.ie that are listening on the audio version of the podcast. And Danielle, how about you? Your grandson made a little guest appearance. That's always
I've muted
myself for us
several times because he's been chattering in the background.
That's okay.
So that's part of my cycle of life right now is that I've taken care of a toddler a few days a week, and I take care of my aging mother when she needs me to, and she often says to me, "You really are the sandwich generation." I'm like, I want to be peanut butter. So it's just where I am in my life at this moment. I get to see the parallels, and I get to see the whole gamut, right? My daughter being a mother for the first time, and the challenges that brings to personal peace and sleep and other, emotional mastery and all kinds of things. So it's, I don't know, there's another term that I heard, and I can't remember the woman that said it, but she said, we get to this point in our life and some people, for women, we get to this point in our life and some people call it menopause, but we call it regenopause. You get to define yourself differently and you get to make more choices and you get to go a new direction. And those are the people that I think that I 12 hours can help the best are those people in regenopause. As Bobby said, they're in transition of any sort. But that's a really fun piece of the shift in humanity, right? Is that we're all at different places in that. There are toddlers and infants and new parents and our generation and all of that. So I can speak to a lot of that, and
Yeah.
I would love to have people reach out to me. Also, the best place probably to find me is on Facebook and to message me there. I'm not great about email. There is an email listed, and I do check it sometimes, but I'm not great about it. So if you are interested in reaching out to me that way, that is mbarmranch@gmail.com.
Beautiful.
Awesome. Thank you. And I'll just leave with a little story that just kind of popped up to me as you guys were sharing. I'm up in Alaska. Salmon fishing is very important to our economy, and we're one of the last places that has like just lots and lots of rivers and lakes that are the same way they've been for 10,000 years. They really haven't been destructed. And I was reading the thing on Oregon. They have nice rivers and they have salmon there as well, but they have problems with the dams, the hydroelectric dams on the Columbia and the Willamette River. And to solve those, they have built salmon ladders where the salmon can jump up. They're used to jumping up waterfalls. They have to do that on their path back to their spawning grounds. But to do that, they have to stop and rest. They have to save their energy. And an interesting thing has happened in Oregon as they've tried to have dominion over nature as opposed to being in harmony with it, is that the sea lions have learned that those salmon ladders are like all-you-can-eat buffets because the salmon tend to pool in that area. And salmon has up until very recently, spending $1 billion a year trying to keep the sea lions from eating all of the salmon. And they've been using explosives and boats and barricades and net systems and all kinds of different things to be able to do that. But they wanted to protect the salmon and they want to not harm the sea lion. And they just have kind of thrown in the towel and realized that they're going to have to start killing the sea lions if they want to maintain the salmon fishery. So not a super happy thought to leave you guys with, but maybe just one that will generate the initial idea, the seedling of an idea that living in harmony with the natural cycles that are occurring all throughout our life gets to be a lot easier, and there's a heck of a lot less unintended consequences to the management of it. So if you would like to reach out to me, the two folks that seem to resonate most with my work are those folks that are in transition and kind of the hyper overachiever who has been pursuing a path to happiness through the acquisitions of external goods and has kind of beginning to realize this may not be the answer because I'm super good at achieving stuff, but I still haven't gotten that internal peace that I'm looking for. Those folks are good clients for the work that I'm doing. And all of my relationships begin with a complimentary exploration just to see if you like my style and I feel like you're a good fit for the work that I'm doing. And so if you'd like to reach out, you can do that either on Facebook or my email address is bobby@bobbycobb.com. So you can reach me there as well. So thanks everybody for tuning in. And those of you who are watching the replay somewhere on the interwebs. And thank you to my beautiful souls that I get to spend many Mondays with. Danielle and Jan. It's like the highlight of my week. I feel very blessed that the cycle of my work week begins with the Presence Posse podcast.
And thank you too, Bobby. It's a highlight of my week as well, I must say.
And thanks
Awesome.
for stepping up to the technology of it. Yay.
Yeah, such that my stepping up is.
You did great.
I always try to do my best. Sometimes it's not that good. As evidenced by the fact that I'm still scrolling Danielle's contact info. All right, cheers. Thanks everybody for tuning in, and we will see you next time with another Presence Posse Presents. Bye-bye for now.